So, in case you missed it somehow, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the Super Bowl last year, which means that now they're basically playing with house money. Who should they keep? Who should they get rid of? It's all a very interesting topic, I think. And so let's just get into it. The most important thing to talk about is that 180 million is going to end up being the cap space this year. The cap went down, it usually goes up. That messes with everyone's plans and especially Tampa Bay's. So these are the key players right here, the guys who they really either need to keep or, could at least want to keep, people that will probably get a decent contract. And I also have the cap hit that I'm projecting that they will get, the contract I'm projecting they will get. This is just guesses. It could be higher, it could be lower, but we're just going to work with this for now. So at the top of the screen, you see they have 13.4 million in cap space. A lot of people thought it was higher. I thought it was higher too. That's because Over the Cap actually made a mistake, and I think they forgot to account for a couple of raises that happened, and also you got to take out about 5.8 million for rookie contracts, which feels about right. So with that, they'll have about 13.4 million when it's all left over. And now you might be looking at some of these numbers and saying Shaquille Barrett, that's 70 years, 70 years would be a lot. 70 million for 4 years, which is about $11 million. And you're saying, okay, Jackson, are you just really bad at math? What are you talking about? But no, the difference is that in the NFL, it's very different than the NHL. In the NHL, you basically, if you have let's say a 7-year, $70 million deal, it's just going to be $10 million a year, no matter what. But in the NFL, you can backload these contracts. So you can make a contract where you get paid more later on and less earlier on. So that way the cap hit isn't as bad for this next year when they're trying to repeat and they have a great team and just want to keep it together. So that's why you kind of see a little bit like that. So as a whole, if they were to sign everybody to what I feel like is about fair and what about they could get on the open market as well, we're looking at about $45 million that they will need to re-sign everyone on this list. Also, I put an asterisk next to Gronkowski and Brown. They both aren't making that much because I'm assuming they want to stay in Tampa. That's what a lot of people are assuming, but that is an assumption. And I wouldn't be shocked if someone offers Antonio Brown like $7 million a year for a 1-year deal, and he might take that. I don't think that that's out of the question by any means. Seems like Gronkowski isn't going anywhere, though. So you see that there's 13.4 million in the cap. We're just going to make it 13 million. We'll round, which means that they will totally, as a whole, need about 45 million to re-sign everybody. But you see I put 52 next to it, and that's because they still are going to need to get some depth guys. And there's a few key depth guys that I think could warrant like $1 million contract each, which means that the total net need would probably be about 39 million. The 4 key depth guys are Joe Haeg, Blaine Gabbert, Kevin Minter, and Jaden Mickens. Mickens, the kick returner. Minter, a solid backup linebacker. Gabbert, backup quarterback. And Haeg was their 6th offensive lineman. I know that a lot of people are going to say, like, well, who cares if they lose Gabbert? But they're going to have to replace him with somebody. So they're going to have to spend money there either way. So this is a clear issue, right? You need $52 million. You only have $13 million. So you're going to have to let a lot of people walk, right? Well, not exactly. There are things you can do. One of the key things you can do is restructure contracts, something that I've heard Mike Evans is already in talks with trying to get done to keep the team together. And I think a lot of people don't fully understand. That doesn't mean that Mike Evans necessarily makes less money. It just means that he makes less money for this year. Watch, look right here. So in the first column, the one furthest to the left, that's 17, 18, and 19. That's how many millions of dollars he's currently under contract going to make. But what I have on the right would be an example of a restructure. So he ends up making a good amount more money throughout this contract, but the first year you're actually saving $5 million. That's what I have on the top right. That 5, you're saving $5 million this year. So you can do this to save money, which could be key. So here are 5 examples of what restructures could look like for Tampa Bay. I think Mike Evans, Donovan Smith, Jason Pierre-Paul, Ali Marpet, and Ryan Jensen, all examples of guys who could get their contracts restructured. Now, the obvious issue with this is just that eventually you're going to have to pay the piper. You can't keep kicking the can down the road for so much. You're either going to have to cut guys and take on a lot of dead cap money in the future, or you're just going to have to pay them outright and pay them a lot of money in the future. And, with doing this, it means that eventually they're going to have to pay like Ryan Jensen 14 million, Jason Pierre-Paul 17 million, Donovan Smith 21 million, Mike Evans 23 million. So those would all be kind of tough contracts later on, and it might make it very difficult to keep everybody in a couple years from now. But again, if the logic is keep this team together for next year, this could make a lot of sense. And it's what we've seen New Orleans do, and it's how they've had some really good teams these past few years, even if they never, won the big one. And I also have here 3 potential cuts, 3 guys who could end up going that they could save some money on: Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, and William Goldson. They would save about $6 million for each of them, whatever they cut. It seems like, Brate and Howard, they're both tight ends, and with Gronkowski probably coming back, they might be key. And Goldston, he is a starter when they played 3-4, but they played a lot less 3-4 last year than they did the year before. He might kind of end up being that third defensive tackle, and maybe they don't feel like that's necessary if Sue comes back. But if Sue leaves, maybe they will feel he's necessary. So those are 3 guys they could potentially cut and save some money. So that's their situation. What are some now? Now I want to talk about what I think I would do, what I want to do, and what I want to see Tampa Bay do. Because obviously, I'm a Bucs fan. I'm wearing a t-shirt, have a hat on, a big Bucs fan. So first, I started off looking at this because this seems like the ideal situation, which would be you sign Shaquille Barrett, Levante David, Rob Gronkowski, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown, which means you don't sign Sue or Fournette, which you can deal with, and you save $10 million that way, because I do believe Sue would get about $7 million. He got $8 million last year and played well last year, so I think he'll get in the same ballpark at least, which means that now they don't need $52 million, they need $42 million. But the issue is that if you restructure everyone's contract that I mentioned, that can save $24 million. And if you cut Cameron Brate, which is kind of, I feel like that's the one you could stomach the easiest. He's currently a tight end 3, making $6 million. So that seems like you could deal with it. You're stuck still negative $12 million under the cap, which is definitely an issue. You got to find a way to make that somehow. And you're kind of out of restructures to work with. So you could do this, which would just be you cut all 3 of the potential guys you could cut: OJ Howard, Cameron Brate, and William Goldson. Or maybe you trade, you find a way to trade them and get some sort of draft pick back, maybe a draft pick in a future year, so that way it doesn't hurt the cap. But either way, you get rid of them in a way that you don't have to pay them. Now you're good. So that's an option you could do. You get basically all the key guys left. You'll need a defensive tackle, and you probably need a running back as well, but you can at least do that through the draft. So that's one way you could try this. And you're pretty close to what you were last year, which is the goal. Now, there's also this option, which is the same thing I showed, kind of, but one of the key things is you look at who's in the no sign column. Now Chris Godwin isn't there, which obviously would hurt. He is a great wide receiver, but I also think that at the same time, we could be looking at Chris Godwin as kind of a expendable piece, given what Tampa Bay has with their roster. They have Antonio Brown, they have obviously Mike Evans, and there's guys like Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson who did well in depth. So to have that wide receiver depth pretty well suited, it would hurt to lose Godwin, but it might not be a devastating blow. And in doing this, you save the $24 million in restructure, and you only have to cut Cameron Brate, and now you're -2. But you can find ways to work around that. I know if they cut Jordan Whitehead, they'd be okay, and maybe have Mike Edwards try to be the starting safety. There's ways you can get around $2 million. That's a lot easier to do than $12 million. And let's also talk about this. So you could also restructure Tom Brady's contract, which that's an option. It absolutely is. He's currently in a situation where he could restructure his own contract, which means he would have to get a second year added, because currently this is the last year of his deal. You could take $8 million off this year, and then you'd probably have to pay him like at least $36 million next year. Maybe he would just take a lower deal next year because he just wants to play with Tampa Bay or whatever. I doubt it. But, we have seen him do that before, so worth mentioning. But either way, you could probably save about $8 million, potentially even more by doing this. But $8 million seems probably the limit. And as you see, if you did that, you could theoretically sign all of the key free agents that are about to go. You'd need the 52 million again, but your restructure would save 32 million, which now means that when you cut all 3 of the guys who you could potentially cut, that saves 18 million. You're looking at $2 million in cap space. So they would have to cut 3 guys to make this work, and probably a fourth guy because you're still 2 million under. But you could, in theory, keep Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Gronkowski, Godwin, Brown, Sue, and Fournette all with this. And, with the 2 million, maybe Sue takes a $5 million deal, or maybe Gronkowski takes a $2 million deal and Antonio Brown takes a $1 million deal, right? Like, you can find ways to make it work potentially. Another option, and kind of a more realistic option, is again going back to you let Sue and Fournette walk. And then what you would need to have happen is you would, the restructure with the Brady deal would mean that you save 32 million, which means you have to cut 2 players. So by that, you would actually have a couple million in cap space after this. You'd have to cut Goldson and you would have to cut Brait, I would assume, and you keep OJ Howard. Or maybe you cut both tight ends and let Gronkowski be your primary tight end. I don't know. It's interesting. So yeah, that's really Tampa Bay's options, right? They can try to restructure. I actually think there could be some logic in restructuring Brady's contract. I don't know if I love it because it does kind of feel like, okay, next year now he'll be 45. We're really putting a lot of eggs into that basket. But at the same time, he was great at 43. So maybe, and if there's any guy you can't doubt, it is Tom Brady. So I definitely think that that's interesting to me. And one of the things that really Jason Light and this Buccaneers, front office said was, we're just going to be aggressive and we're going to go for it this year, even though they finished 7-9 the year before. Maybe they do that again and say, we're going to restructure everyone's deals. We'll suck in 3 years. That's fine. But if we can get another Super Bowl out of it, it's totally worth sucking for, 10 years. That's totally a trade-off every team would take, I think, except for maybe the Patriots. Personally, this is the option that I like the best for Tampa Bay. Don't re-sign Sue, Fournette, or Godwin unless like Fournette or Sue will take a very cheap deal just to stay on the roster. I think that you don't do it. I think that you keep Barrett, Levante David, Gronkowski, and Brown. Really, Barrett and David are the 2 guys that were so crucial in the first run. You think you'd want to keep those guys back, and Gronkowski and Brown you can get at sort of a cheaper price. And with this, now with the restructure, you are in a better situation where you can cut Cameron Brate. He's the only guy you have to cut. You have tight end depth. Admittedly, the tight end depth is Gronkowski and OJ Howard, 2 guys with injury histories. So that's a little bit nervous to some degree, but you have to find the cap space somewhere. And now you're just 2 million behind in cap where you can make it work. I think this makes the most sense. And in doing this, you don't even have to restructure Brady's deal. You don't have to give him a second year where he'll be making a ton of money. Or you could give him a second year if you want to, but you don't have to make it with 8 million. You could just make it with 2 million, which would just work a lot better. But yeah, that's what I think. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on what Tampa Bay should do this year in this offseason? It's a very interesting situation that they find themselves in. But again, even if they screw it up, you got a Super Bowl ring, not the end of the world. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.